The most unthinkable thing happened after he took off his wife's life support. In life, one of the toughest choices you'll ever make is whether to remove the plug on your loved one's life support. If it doesn't seem like things are going to get easier, you may have to decide a certain amount of time. After a regular morning took a turn for the worse, Ryan Finley had to handle this. His wife was not going to get up, but he did everything in his capacity to make sure she was okay. She was unresponsive for 2 weeks. He decided by then to accept that it was over. From Oklahoma, Ryan and Jill Finley were only a normal pair. They were husband and wife, 31 and 32, for 4 years, and looking forward to everything the future had in store for them. He worked as a builder for plumbing while she was an underwriter for loans. They wanted to spend time in their house together while they have free time, and on their porch he'd always study while she'd catch up on a nap. For all of them, the weekend in question began normally. In those days, they enjoyed hanging out with families and close friends. Not one of them had something odd picked up. He woke up shortly after 7 a.m. on Sunday and felt something he'd never seen before in his life. He had no idea what was wrong, but his gut instructed him to check on his mom. Jill was sitting as always right beside him, but something alerted him that something was wrong. Ryan said he talked to Brad Matz that he didn't realize what happened to him at the time. Much of the time on Saturday and Sunday, he'd actually let his wife sleep in. There was something peculiar about that day, though. His instincts were telling him to wake her up and see if she was safe. To his dismay, no matter how much he raised his voice or shook her, she didn't wake up. He bent in to see how she was able to breathe, and when he found that she wasn't breathing, his suspicions were confirmed. Ryan realized there was something he needed to do, so he picked up his cell and called 911. He did CPR on Jill after he called in the emergency. That he had this crucial life ability was a positive, particularly if his preparation took place a decade earlier. He placed her on the floor and began doing everything he could remember about the lesson. This was the first time he had to bring to work at all. He was unable to revive her whilst he did his hardest. There was no other option for Ryan but to wait for the EMTs to arrive. It only took about 15 minutes, but to him it seemed like a lifetime. He stood up and watched the paramedics use a defibrillator on his wife as they turned up at his house. They delivered the unit to her core with electric shocks. He was just forced to watch as her body jolted and struck the concrete. As the ambulance rescuers did everything they could to save Jill, he could hear the sound of her body reaching the concrete. Unfortunately, their endeavors yielded no success. This meant he wanted to head to the hospital. She was taken to the ambulance by paramedics and bound for Oklahoma Heart Hospital. He followed them in his vehicle, though a million thoughts were rushing through his head. Jill was brought to the ER straight away after they arrived. Jill was placed on a respirator while she was in the ER. For close to half an hour, the doctors effectively stabilized her. It required a lot of determination and hard work, but they succeeded in making her heart beat again. She sighed once again, but this wasn't quite the end of it. Next, they had to determine what to do. For Ryan, who also had to process what was going on, it was difficult. The doctors told him that Jill had a heart attack in her sleep, and because of this, for about 5 minutes, her body didn't have any oxygen. This was the explanation that she was in danger of brain injury. To minimize the harm, Jill was placed in a chill suit by the doctors to get her body temperature down to 90 degrees. For the 24 hours following the accident, she was wrapped with cooling sheets. They had to get that back up again after they reduced her body temperature, and they hoped when they did that she'd recover her consciousness. This was what was generally going on with patients. Physicians administered various experiments because she didn't wake up and learned there was little brain function left. Jill was officially in a coma, and there was little to do but wait and see. Ryan decided to be at her side the whole time. In the ward, he'd nap and even curl up in his room, and as suddenly as his wife opened her eyes, he needed to be there. Though he was committed to her, with time his dream began to diminish. The more she remained in a coma, the smaller the likelihood she'd wake up and survive. Ryan waited amidst it all for Jill to wake up. When the doctors told him of her survival chances, the truth started to set in. They told him her odds of survival went down to just 1% after 48 to 72 hours. He understood he had to recognize this as the days went by. To make sense of his feelings and find out what to do, he started journaling, and in his letter, Ryan finds comfort in sitting by his wife and writing. It was painful to face the truth, as you might guess. Time and again, he'd remember that his wife was already in a coma when he got up. "I would wake up every morning and I'd remember this wasn't a fantasy," he said. After witnessing no developments, the physicians have begun to lose faith. Days have shifted to weeks and her prospects of survival have diminished. She would not work as well as she did before if she woke up. Not only was Ryan the only one who was hurting from the set of circumstances, her parents have had to contend with the fact that Jill would outlive them. They had to conclude for 2 weeks without any indication of change. Ryan asked for advice about Jill to her friends. They had to find, among other items, how long she might live on life support if she didn't display any signs of getting better. This, by far, was the most important choice he's ever had to make in his life. In his letter, he wrote about the ordeal, saying, "The worst day of my life could be today. I ultimately have to determine if Jill is going to survive or not. About my soulmate, my all. We can't think of one that's any tougher to create." He remembered a recollection as he pondered it even more and found the solution was there all along. All of them had just reached their 30s, didn't support. They really didn't have kids yet. This was most likely not an aspect of their plans, and given this, several years back they spoke about it. His aunt was once on life support, which is why between them something came up. Ryan recalled all of a sudden that Jill said she wouldn't want to live that way, and that's all the reply he needed. With her family, he took it up, and eventually they decided Jill would have to go off life support to bring an end to things. It wasn't all convenient, of course, for them to make this call, not at all. The dialogue between husband and wife brought them clarification at least. Ryan applied for the court order required and told the doctors of their intention, yet they needed him to know a couple of things before they could move through with it. They told him about something known as the last rally. Anytime a human is taken off life support, this normally occurs. If the body changes and begins to shut down, it might create noises or shift. When Ryan and his family learned this, they had to brace for the moment in question. They came together for their final goodbyes, and Jill was taken off life support by emergency staff. Ryan stood by her side the whole time, but he didn't anticipate what would happen. Ryan said that her whole upper torso would make a little bit of a shift, and then it would start mumbling. It was too much for him. He couldn't bear the idea of seeing her body fall away from life. He felt physically ill and had to leave the room. He did a decent job at getting things together in front of everyone else before that, but this was more. Although he was initially confused, after some time things improved. Jill was no longer on life support, but even hours later she held on. Then his mom instructed him to get back to the bed. She informed him he wanted to see what was going on. He was reluctant at first since he thought it would just make life more complicated for him, but his curiosity was too much. On the final day, he went to visit her. The moment he stepped into the venue, he noticed Jill hadn't mumbled incoherently during her last rally. The only thing Ryan heard her tell was, "I want to go home and get me out of here." He realized Jill was very unlikely to survive, but he attempted to tamp down on his expectation that she would wake up. When he heard Jill claim she wanted to attend their favorite restaurant, everything changed. Ryan was reluctant to accept it. Was his wife really returning to life? He asked a question to see if that was really the case. Jill offered the right response when he asked her the name of their cat and puppy. He then tried questions such as their address and math. What's 5 plus 5? To his delight, she offered them all the right responses. Not only was she conscious, but she was also completely operational too. It was a genuine surprise to see his wife was overcoming the odds. They filled Ryan with intense joy. He shared, "I can't imagine a better feeling than what I felt right then." He spent days preparing himself to lose her, according to him. It seemed unreal because despite the odds, the best imaginable thing happened. It looked like he was in a fantasy. It took him a whole day to digest the reality that Jill was back. Ryan wasn't the only one perplexed by the surprising turn of events. One of the physicians advised him that after being in a coma for a few days, her survival likelihood was no more than 1%. The odds went down every single day after. This indicated her wake-up and survival chances were really poor. Jill expressed that she was advised she was not textbook material. The one thing she could recall from the whole period, though, was the hospital's huge tub. Hearing what she has to suggest about knowing Ryan's decision to remove the plug on her life support is fascinating. The patient doesn't survive long enough to realize much at the time. In this situation, it was different, though. Can you imagine Jill was absolutely in agreement with his choice? She tagged that she wouldn't have wanted to live like that, but he did the right thing. According to her, living that way is just not me. Now that she was back, it was time for them to make sure nothing like this would ever happen again. Jill learned she was suffering from a congenital illness. When she was sleeping, her heart could suddenly stop. They had no means of describing the remarkable healing, so a pacemaker was placed to guarantee her heart would begin to pound. If something like this happened in the future, the system would shock her heart before depleting her body's oxygen. Although Jill was doing more than everyone predicted, she really needed support to get back to life. She had to focus on relearning how to do easy activities over a few months, like fixing her shoes and brushing her teeth. She got back the knowledge that she missed when she was in the coma with the aid of speech and occupational therapy. By the end of it, she was back to her old self. It really is an unbelievable story. Ryan and Jill had a silver lining in the shape of a newfound love for each other after all that they went through. Before that, while they enjoyed each other a lot, they realized they had to be appreciating every minute they shared. They strive to spend every spare moment together, Jill said. There are days where this involves only doing errands for one another. We're confident that you'll resonate with us when we claim they've been through a lot, and their sense of humor hasn't been compromised. Jill also claimed that because the pair are now behaving like newlyweds, her friends joke about how jealous they were. It's difficult to take for granted what you have, especially while you're married. Sadly, after many years together, it's common for married couples to resent each other. After all that, Ryan was more than happy to have Jill back. His community, though, couldn't help but feel as if he deserved better. They decided to thank him for being dedicated and trustworthy despite everything he went through. He was eligible for the Oklahoma Heart Hero Award by the facility where Jill was confined, and is provided to locals who've used an automatic external defibrillator or CPR to save a life. Because his wife's recuperation began with him offering her CPR, the caring husband was entitled to it. The moment she got back home, his concern for Jill didn't stop. "There isn't a night that goes by I don't wake up," Ryan laughed. "I usually kick her, and I know we're all right if she kicks me back." She also had a funny thing to share. She said they stopped by the restaurant she was dreaming of before she got up from the coma, if you were curious. "We're so delighted it worked out for them." Each marriage is different. This next couple, for example, waited about 10 years to open a wedding present. Brandon and Kathy recalled one of their own when contemplating wedding presents for a neighbor. Ironically, their favorite wedding present remained in the wardrobe unopened. Though it had been 9 years since their wedding day, none of them had unwrapped it. They agreed in the end that it was time actually to see what was inside. Within the package, though, the essence of the present couldn't hesitate. The reality is that the length of time they spend before actually getting a look at it has something to do with it. Brandon and Kathy Gunn reside in the Michigan community of Northville. They tied the knot in front of 300 guests in Jackson on September 1st, 2007. They received loads of lovely gifts, but there was one in the pile that stuck out. Allison, her great-aunt, was the one who, apart from a silver ribbon, offered them a white box with no other ornaments. On top of that, there was a letter that said, "Don't open before first dispute." Might it be that as they've never fought, they didn't open it? This wasn't true, she said. "Now in our 9 years, there have obviously been a lot of disputes, debates, and slammed doors," Kathy said on Facebook. Then she told ABC News that she and Brandon didn't want to turn the box on because you don't have it once you open it. What could have been inside? There was another explanation why the present wasn't freely opened. She told ABC News, "We enjoy a challenge." It turned into a rather strange game between them. Kathy said they're both really competitive people and explained, "I really believe we both stopped turning to the box because it would have symbolized our defeat," she said, "and for that we're both too stubborn and determined." The two of them didn't want to be the cracked person. Apart from that, they weren't aware the war was big enough to open the gift for. What if it's not our worst struggle, she reasoned. What if the one ahead of us is worse and we don't have our box? Kathy and Brandon felt it would symbolize failure to open the package after a feud, and as a matter of fact, she knew what her great-uncle Bill once said, "Nothing's so terrible that it can't get worse." Although Kathy and Brandon were adamant about not accepting it, the present was interesting for other family members. Around 2 years after the wedding, Aunt Allison also asked them about it. When asking whether they'd opened it previously, Kathy assured her they hadn't. "She looked at us as if we were insane," she said with a chuckle. In the family, it quickly became a running joke, and they didn't believe they'd never even open it. Aunt Allison's gift meant several things to Kathy, and the two women were always close. Currently, she also referred to her great-aunt as a surrogate grandmother. She even knew for 50 years that Allison and Bill were together. In 2004, 3 years after Kathy and Brandon's wedding, he died. The entire family was grieving his death, but this just rendered the gift that much more special. Most of those in the family were smiling at their reluctance to open the gift, but not everyone was entertained. We're talking about Kathy's aunt, who didn't think it was fair to wait on her for such a long time. Mom was saying, "Kathy, what if there was food or something inside?" shared Kathy. They then questioned Aunt Allison about it, and she said there was no food inside or other perishables. The package sat unopened for about 10 years, and they'd already had a daughter and a son by then. They'd even traveled thrice since then, but they haven't neglected to carry the gift with them no matter where they went. No matter how many times they fought, though, they didn't open it. By then, it was too precious to them. "We didn't want to ruin the importance of taking that in by opening it up after a stupid fight," Kathy said. And finally, on May 29, 2016, the mystery came to an end. When they thought about what to get for the wedding of a friend, Kathy looked at Brandon and told him, "We still have the box." He said, "If we made it this far, I don't think we need the box to save us," and she agreed. This was why 9 years later, they eventually wanted to see what was inside, and they let out a joke as they opened it. They noticed 2 wine glasses, an aromatic bath set, and candles inside when they eventually opened the package. They were both smiling at the contents. Did they still wait on any of this stuff for 9 years? They couldn't believe that was going to fix all their fights, but this wasn't the only aspect of the gift. There were 2 notes there too. One was for Kathy and one was intended for Brandon. They were both involved in hearing what their note was telling. "Find a burger, seafood, or something you both want. Love, Aunt Allison," read Kathy's. The one for him, on the other hand, said, "Brandon, go and get flowers and a bottle of wine. Heart, Aunt Allison." Each of the notes contained $200 so they could buy presents, and it seemed like the older woman passed on to the pair her marital wisdom. It was a wonderful present, but did it measure up to the hype? It was thoughtful, but they felt it was going to be a different matter. Kathy and Brandon have been waiting for capital, a bath set, wine glasses, and candles for such a long time. In the end, in a different sense, the gift was significant. We assumed all along that the contents of that box held the key to saving a marriage, an age-old trick unknown to us rookies, Kathy said. In a deeper context, the box reinforced their partnership. The substance didn't matter as much as the essence of the partnership between them. Brandon and Kathy had to sort their disagreements to settle their fights by refusing to open the gift. Kathy explained, "The box went past what I think my great-aunt had expected. She went, it sat on a shelf collecting dust in different closets, yet it taught us somehow about tolerance, understanding, compromise, and patience." The package helped Kathy and Brandon immensely by holding the gift locked. Kathy spoke of how their challenges grew over the years they met with today. She said, "First you fight to pick up clothes from the floor, then later you fight not to sleep because of colicky babies." The two of them would ask if it was time to open the gift anytime they had a fight. They said, "We think this is a mountain, but maybe it's a molehill," Kathy clarified later. Brandon and Kathy agreed that it wasn't the best moment for it anytime they thought about opening the box. They made sure that other means of settling the wars and disputes were discovered. They didn't know at the point whether they were going to discover a cure or secret in the package and decided despite this it was pointless. They found other resources were never inside the box to build and sustain a solid, stable marriage, she said. They were inside us. Finally, their marriage is going strong because they didn't need it. We're grateful Kathy didn't hold any of the stories to herself. The couple went to Facebook to post it after they opened a package, and Kathy explained the past decade or so on a page named Love What Counts. It went viral, getting 900 likes, 4,000 shares, and 18,000 views. The tale fascinated individuals from many places around the world and reflected how smart Aunt Allison and Uncle Bill were. Some of them even thought the gift did its job perfectly, and we agree. As she met with others, Kathy said she was shocked by the publicity the story gained. She shared, "My husband and I are in shock about how much publicity this tale's received. It seems like it's a blessing that keeps giving." She originally posted it to send the focus to her great-aunt Allison. She's still stunned to see how much of the tale of her gift has traveled since then and didn't realize it would happen. Kathy and Brandon phoned Aunt Allison after they'd seen what was inside the package. Her great-aunt, who now lives in Ohio, was apparently tickled to learn the development and flabbergasted. She thinks it's the funniest and cutest thing because she can't believe we even hung on to it that long, Kathy shared with Today. She went on, "She also thought it was a great story, but she thought we were crazy. Even though Aunt Allison needed it to be special, she didn't realize how special it was." Brandon and Kathy Gunn got a gift on their wedding day believing they should handle battles. Since the big day, a long period has elapsed, but now they can express their wisdom. Kathy clarified that a solid base should be offered to partners about the small stuff, she shared. Learn how to differ and go forward. Learn how to be angry and get over it for the larger stuff. In our case, giving up was never a choice because we never had the idea that marriage would be straightforward.